all your stuff's not exclusively Christian, which I also find interesting. Some of them is like just almost man on the street style interviews.
Yeah.
And what is the kind of philosophy behind that? It's just kind of creating content that builds a bridge with people and letting people be vulnerable.
Living the dream in New York. Like, it's good to live as a capable, competent man in New York City in your 30s when you have money. And when you're 35, you can basically date anybody from there.
Do you think there is a spiritual component to like a spirit in the city where you are in terms of New York and the zeitgeist of the culture there?
Ruslan.
Yeah. All right. So we're here with Eric Jang. And before I do an introduction, he's buttoning himself up. Trying to get extra fresh for us. Shout out to the Patrons, you guys that are here. So we were actually having a pretty cool conversation offline. It wasn't super deep, but I figured we kind of continue that conversation, and then I'd go into my conversation with him because I have a lot of questions for him. Let me move these cans out of the shot. So you had asked me if I felt a call from God to make content. Yeah. Can we get the mic a little closer to your face?
Yeah.
Perfect. Channel and Sue's muted. Cool. Yeah. So it wasn't, I'm actually going to make a video about this today. It wasn't like a call as much as it was, I looked back at my life and what I was good at. And oddly enough, Bible studies about stuff that I cared about and other people cared about was the thing that I had done the longest. So I was doing a men's group every Monday for a decade plus. Of every Monday we get together, and the group would usually start with us playing basketball, cussing each other out, walking into a room, fuming angry at each other, and then we'd start talking about whatever was going on in culture and society, and then that would segue into the Bible study. We're going through the 1 year Bible, we're recapping what the pastor talked about.
Yeah.
And so I didn't do this intentionally. I just started doing what felt natural. And as I look back, I'm like, oh, this is the same thing. I had actually done this more than making music. I'd done this more than playing basketball. I'd done this more than anything else. And I had enough technical ability to figure out how to build all this because I worked at my church. So it wasn't like felt a call. It was more like I followed the opportunity and it just all clicked.
Mm-hmm.
And then I made intentional reinvestments into the team to continue expanding the team and not just trying to like squeeze $1 out of everything, but continue like bringing these guys on. And seeing a void in the world and in the marketplace for like solid Christian representation.
Yeah.
Like who's going to sit down and talk about family with Gary Vee, and have like a meaningful conversation, or who's going to sit down and have a conversation with China Mac about some of the faith aspects and the stuff that's going on. And so like those are the kind of, like I had China Mac on in 2019 and it was like, I was like shared the gospel with him and he was like cool about it. I had Wendy Day on, who I'm not sure if you know who Wendy Day is. She's the guy, she's basically the lady who has facilitated almost every single major record deal from Tupac through Eminem to 50 Cent to Drake to like, she's been a part of everything.
Yeah.
And so I would have her sit down and be like, hey, like, what advice do you have for Christian rappers? And she just riff and cussing and all this kind of stuff, So like, there was a desire for like representation of like, hey, like Christians, we got to be in the mix of this thing. Like we can't just be in our little silos, And the more I kind of peeled away at that onion, I was like, oh, like this is actually how we've always been. It wasn't until the last 100 years where fundamentalism has creeped into the church, and we've pulled back from culture and pulled back from the arts and pulled back from media and pulled back from all these things, with the exception of like exclusively using it to like proselytize. Like we're just going to make content to just preach the gospel. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think there's more of a robust conversation that's possible, And so coming full circle, I'm kind of getting back invited into some of these spaces now that my platform is big enough, where like big YouTubers that I'm a fan of are like, hey, let's do a collab, We're like going on No Jumper, or I'm working on trying to do something with Abba and Preach, and like just different conversations that are happening of like, these aren't, I'm a voice hopefully within the broader, the goal is to be a voice within a broader ecosystem of YouTube, and the becoming a Christian influencer just kind of happened by happenstance.
Yeah, it sounds like you kind of fell into it, like you were the wheel was already running, and then you just kept on running, but like it was almost like God kind of like took away the wheel, and it was like you were just like going down this new path.
Yeah. Yeah. More or less.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you.
Okay.
Let me make sure I got your slider on. Yes, your slider. This is my favorite shot, by the way. Check this out. That's my favorite shot right there. It's a little top heavy, but it's not. It is. Yeah. Can you tilt it down a little bit? This is actually a bit more raw than usual, but it's okay. We'll edit around it in terms of the conversation. Oh, there's Zach Sparazzo. Yeah, look at that shot. That's the money shot right there on Eric. I love it. All right. Okay, so I stumbled across one of your videos. I think somebody sent it to me on Instagram, and it was you sitting down with a lady on your stoop and just loving her and telling her about Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, man, this is like one of the coolest things I've seen in the way you had that conversation, in the way you extended grace and mercy and empathy and listened to her and just let her talk. And I was like, this is beautiful. It was really beautiful. It really touched me. I reacted to it. I don't know if I reached out. I think I reached out to you and just kind of encouraged you. And then it just worked out that you're in town and we could do this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because that conversation happened a year ago, and that video.
And what was that young lady's name?
Her name is Frankie.
Shout out to Frankie.
Yeah. And so that all happened a year ago. Posted the video a year ago, and it was kind of fine. Didn't really get too much, but then since then I've kind of grown, and so then I reposted it with a follow-up interview I did with her a year later, and then that repost has gotten some traction on the internet. So it was interesting because I was like, I remember when I first filmed it, I was like, man, this was a really special moment, right? So I just interviewed. I sit outside my stoop in New York City, and as people walk by, excuse me, hey, do you have a couple minutes to chat? Like, about what? I'm like, I just kind of like interview people and get their stories. Okay. And so that day, I had probably gone through like 20 people walked by, and everyone said no, or everyone was like busy, or super in a rush. It's New York, right? And I was about to call it quits. I was like, all right, God, today's not the day. I'll go and try again tomorrow. And then I hear this woman go like, she was looking for a place to smoke her joint, and she was just walking around, and she was like, oh, there's a Buddhist center right next to me. And she was like, oh, that's a Buddhist center. It doesn't look like a good place to smoke a joint. And I was like, well, you can just smoke on my stoop if you want.
Hello.
But you're going to have to like be in my YouTube video. And she's like, okay. And she's like, what is it about? I'm like, it's just about you.
Yeah.
And then she was like, well, you should know I got a lot of pain in my heart.
Oh,
and I was just like, okay, we're going to do it. And just pretty much right off the bat, just jumped into her story. And yeah, it was crazy.
And where'd you get this format from? Because it almost and this is not in any ways a bad comparison, but it reminds me of Soft White Underbelly a bit, where you're just sitting down with people and just getting their raw story. How did you get this idea of just putting a camera out in New York City on your stoop and just talking to people?
I'm trying to think of a better answer for this, because the initial answer that comes to me is I'm not sure. I knew I wanted to make videos. I love making videos, like and putting stuff together. And I was like, okay, the type of content I can make, I'm not the type who can kind of like similar to you, just like voice off opinions or vlogs or like get ready with me today. So I'm like, okay, I need content. I need to tell stories. How do I find stories? And I was like, oh boy, well, I got to find them in other people. And I did kind of discover that I have an ability to kind of talk with people and different people and kind of uncover their stories. So it just kind of started from there. And in terms of like it being on my stoop, and I guess I just wanted to make it as casual as possible, but also like be in the city and just make it as raw and real and just like, it's not a big deal, but also like, let's get really deep at the same time if we can.
Yeah. Yeah. It has a great aesthetic and feel to it, and then a rawness to it. Is the camera just like on a tripod? And
it's
then
2 tripods,
just 2 tripods, and you just set them out?
Yeah.
Right on the street, or like
it's on the sidewalk, and
no one trips?
It's New York, man. No one cares.
Wow.
Like some people will walk by and be like, what's going on? But no one's ever been like watching us or like everyone's just like, yeah, that's the beautiful thing about New York. You can do whatever you want to do.
Yeah. You're originally not from New York.
I'm originally from the Bay, Cupertino.
Shout out to all the West Coast,
Bay Area. Yeah, got a lot of
Yay area.
a lot of pride in there. But I moved to New York about 6 years ago in the midst of a soul searching journey of sorts,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, and I moved to New York. I was like, I need to figure out like myself and my life, and I would have never expected that I'd be like at this exact moment right here, like you know, in your garage talking about my videos that I make, and I'm a content creator now. Like I am like a CPA, MBA. My full-time job is in business and accounting and finance. You know, like I do financial forecasting and planning and budgeting reporting. Like that was kind of my career path. But then once I moved to New York, it just God had different plans.
So you left New York. You left the Bay, going to New York out of this messy breakup.
Yeah.
And you said you had heard that there were hot girls in New York. Is that correct?
And I can confirm that it's true.
I mean,
Those San Diego, having been here for 2 days, like
just sheer volume though. I mean, it's just population.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Just bigger population.
And density.
Greater odds of attractive
Yes,
people being
yes,
around.
Yes.
And then you get to New York, and then that's how you discover Jesus and get saved.
Yeah, I mean, I was Christian beforehand, but I would say like a lukewarm Christian. It wasn't until I moved to New York and kind of joined a church.
Okay.
And I was like, that was really when the soil began to really be formed. I think like there was a lot of like, you know, what was the parable of the four soils? There's a lot of weeds and rocky dirt and all that stuff. So moving to New York was when all of that began to kind of just, God began to pave the way. So joining a church was like, oh, this is what Christians are like. Like they could be normal people and you know, and then learning about the Christian worldview, the Christian story, and kind of all those things kind of coming together. And at the same time, going through a lot of deep cleaning up, deep inner work, healing, sanctification, all that stuff. And out of all of these things, like, you know, I moved to New York looking for romance, looking for love, looking to heal like my broken heart from this relationship. And I got those things, but not in the way that I had thought. I didn't even know what the problem was, right? Because I thought I was just like, man, I need to find a job that like I'm passionate about, and like I need to find a woman who will love me and whatever. And these are the things that will make me happy. And they are good things. But like, you know, it was moving to New York, being in this raw survival of the fittest type city. Like, I feel like that just kind of set the soil for me to find God in a authentic way. Yeah,
most of my friends who move to New York walk away from God.
I was afraid of that. Yeah, yeah.
They drift, man. It's like the drift capital of the world.
There was some drifting in the first couple of years. But, but he pulled me back in.
How did that happen?
How did what happen?
How did he pull you back in? You said you got just plugged into a church. Like what was the sequence of going to New York? So a little bit of drift happened, and then all of a sudden God pulls you back in.
I think God does what he wants to do. It's kind of like Jonah, like you can keep running, but if he wants you, he's going to get you. But certainly, I think at the core of it was just there's a desperation on my end. Like, so this breakup was kind of like a near-death experience for me. It kind of woke me up.
Okay.
You know, I kind of describe it as like a BC 80 moment. Like after that moment, I was like, oh, life isn't all just like fairy tales and rose-colored glasses. Like, this is life or death, and if I want to make something of myself, like this is the time to do it. And I was like, 27, 29 at the time. So I think what it was just a constant desperation, and I still kind of have it of like, of honestly realizing and believing that I do need God. Because in the past, before that, it was just like, oh, I believe in God, yeah, creator of the universe. I'll try to do good. But like actually wanting to do his will and be obedient, for a long time, I was like, nah, I'm good. I just want to do things my way. But nothing brings you back to God and desperate for God as much as pain does.
Yeah.
And so it was just like a lot of pain. I think since then it's just like, and I'm still constantly fighting between flesh and spirit, right, every day. But something changed whereby it was just like a willingness to be like, okay, God, yeah, like I really need you. And I think like that's what, even if I did drift, like, you know, like go out and like club and get into promiscuity and, you know, repeatedly make bad decisions. I was smoking a lot of pot at the time. I was like numbing through alcohol and women, all these things, right? I think a lot of people do. And it was just like, I wish I could be like, I was like good right off the bat, but it was, I don't know, it was just like two steps backward, 3 steps forward. And I can't, it's really hard to describe how God works in your life.
It sounds like it was more of a process.
It was definitely a process.
It wasn't like I remember I had this come to Jesus moment.
No, it was, it was many moments of him breaking me and tears and then realizations and then coming back and then doing the thing that I wasn't supposed to be doing and then coming back and then,
I came to faith in high school, but it was a 2-year process. It was like dating one girl who like got me going to church, and the only reason I went to church is because I wanted to hang out with her on Sundays. Yeah, and then that over the course we would break up and get back together, and then like they dated a Jehovah's Witness girl, and then I went on this like intense soul searching of like, who is Jesus? Is he God? Is he just the Son of God? Like I had to answer all the questions. Yeah. And then I became this like this jerk of like telling the Jehovah's Witness girl that she was in a cult, which was totally not the way to treat someone.
To love. Yeah.
So me and her broke up as I like was certain on but I would say I didn't fully have that moment of like surrender until like a year after that. And it was when me and the original girl got back together and broke up. I found out she was cheating on me, and it was this big messy thing. And I basically pulled up to her house while the other dude was there, and we had this like cinematic movie like confrontation. And my buddy was with me, and he pulled the dude to the side, and then he like confirmed that they had been doing stuff. And he's like, I didn't know that was your girlfriend. And then like, that was the moment I drove home, and I remember like, all right, God, like I'm done playing games. Like I'm done having like one foot in my way, one foot your way, and fully just surrendered everything. And then like got into a group, got going to church regularly, reading my Bible, that sort of stuff. But it was a 2-year process. It wasn't an instantaneous moment. You know, it wasn't like I remember, like I was the guy in church putting my hand up every week for years, saying the prayer. It just didn't stick, you know?
Yeah. It went from a mind thing to a heart thing through getting cheated on.
Yeah. But I'm glad it happened the way it happened. Like, I'm glad it all worked out, you know? And a year after is when 2 years after I met my wife.
How do you, which is crazy. Like, you don't hear that, like people staying together for like 15 years. But from that cheating moment, like, how do you know in that moment, like, because like that moment of surrender? Because I feel like if I was in that place, I'd be like, yo, I am pissed off. Like, I am so angry. How did you go from anger to surrender?
Well, you know, you just kind of said it earlier, and I had a teacher, my senior year, my English teacher. His name was Tambo. He was the football coach. He's very independently wealthy with real estate. Brilliant guy. He's Italian guy. He'd always like kind of like troll us about like if the mafia was real and this whole thing. We'd like watch Godfather and like write papers about it. Like that was like Tambo was amazing. Okay. He was great. And he always had this quote. He had said a lot of things, but he turned our senior English class, because he was tenured, he turned it into a communication theory class. He's like, we're not doing literature. Like, I'm going to teach you guys communication theory. Like, you actually need to know how to communicate. And he would have these really philosophical moments. And he said to us, the only time people will change is if they're hurt, bored, or scared. And he said, bored being the least likely to change. Yeah. If you're hurt or scared, that's when you'll change. And so I think I finally got to a point of just being so hurt. And like, I can't keep being this person and doing this thing over and over again, you know, and I didn't really understand how much work I had to do on the other side of that. Like I just knew like I needed Jesus. I didn't know there was all this trauma from my childhood and all this crazy stuff that like I had to then, which took decades to work through. But it was, I think it was just as simple as just being hurt and just being like, oh man, like, you know, the world is darker and the people who you think love you can hurt you.
Yeah.
And let me not play with God.
Yeah. But that would imply that you were not doing like following God before that in some capacity.
I was still like sleeping with her and doing other stuff. You know what I mean?
Got it.
Stuff that I just knew I shouldn't be doing, but I was doing anyway.
Got it.
And so, and not to say like I was perfect afterwards. I definitely wasn't. But I think, I think just knowing that I am incapable of being righteous on my own. And so like Jesus' imputed righteousness on me is what I need. And then I need to just walk in that surrender.
Yeah.
You know? And so similar to you, it was a process. Yeah. It wasn't like a...
But it both started from like tense moments of either pain or sadness or whatever it was. But it was just like a desperate need. It was a cold realization that like, okay, God, you are the best way. Even though I can't see you, I can understand.
Right.
But, all right.
Now, did you grow up Christian, like your family and stuff?
Not really, no. So like, my parents weren't really Christian. Like, my mom and I would go to church once a month. She played piano, so like... and so like I didn't have any Christian friends, so it wasn't like strong like that. But I went through some sort of like theoretical does God exist kind of thing in high school, and I came out of that with like, yes, I do believe God exists. But as like knowing Jesus and like understanding redemption and the fall of man and all that, the whole story, I was like not aware. Yeah. And then once I hit college, I was just like, yo, I wanna join a fraternity, I wanna party, I wanna meet girls. Yeah. And so I just kind of put God away to the side. And then what happened was like, once, you know, did all the things my way until that moment where I broke up with, you know, had that breakup, which was a result of, you know, all the things that were left unaddressed. It was just like, oh, I've been doing my things my way this whole time. And that's why I'm in this like area I'm now. So let's do it your way, God.
Was it like you knew that you were responsible for the breakup, or was it that you allowed yourself to be hurt by the breakup?
No, I was responsible.
You were responsible. So as you're doing this like internal reevaluation, you're like, no. I had a good thing and I screwed this up. Yeah. And then the guilt and the shame and the hurt from that was kind of a reality check.
And the pain of losing someone you love.
Yeah. Were you ever able to cross paths with her again, kind of on this side of like doing some of the work and becoming a different person?
Not yet. I think it'll happen one day. Yeah. I'm not eager about it. I think I think it's fine. Yeah.
That's
but
awesome.
it feels like there is some sort of full circle thing that will happen with that at some point.
Yeah. No, the girl that I broke up with or whatever was, we're actually still friendly till this day.
The one who cheated on you.
Okay. Yeah. She's
still cheating on people, or
I don't know if she's cheating on people. No, I don't know if she's cheating on people, but we follow each other on Instagram, and she comes to the church I go to occasionally, and my wife and her are friendly when they see each other, and like it's all good, you know. And so let's just say
crazy how something happened 17 years ago can still feel not close per se, but there's still a tangibility about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in God's providence, not to become the super spooky Calvinist guy, but like in God's providence, I'm super pumped with how my life turned out. Like it worked out for the good.
Yeah, and that's how I look at it all. Like I would not have done anything differently. That's not what I mean. I am glad that it happened. Yeah. I would not be here talking to you if all those things didn't happen.
Yeah. Now, when people think New York, they don't assume there's a lot of Christians there. But again, just by sheer volume, if you're talking 8 million people on the island and 1% of those folks are Christian, that's still 80,000 people.
You find them in the weirdest places sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what kind of church did you go to, and like what which stream did you swim in, and like what was that like?
I would say it's like kind of non-denominational, but also leaning a little bit on the evangelical side. Okay. So it's a very missional focused church, which I think kind of really built into like my calling with these videos and feeling like I want to go out into the city and meet God what was the question kind of?
Well, because I think of like Hillsong, New York City. I think of those types of churches, and then more of like Catholic. When you think of New York, like those two things. And I've been to other churches, but people don't know that there's like a poppin' Christian community in New York.
Yeah. So it's called Church of the City. It's with led by a pastor named John Tyson. I would say it's like kind of in between, just because these are popular churches. Redeemer, which is founded by Tim Keller.
Yeah.
And
rest in peace,
like
Tim Keller.
Presbyterian, Presbyterian kind of like liturgical and like nice hymnal kind of, and then in Hillsong, which is kind of like more extravagant. And so it's kind of in the middle where it's like very grounded in the scripture, like let's think through these things and be intellectual, but then like also let's not forget about like let's not just like sit around and let's go out and do stuff.
Yeah.
And then just constantly being seeking the presence of God.
Yeah. That's cool. That's dope.
Yeah.
That's dope.
I'm very lucky to have found that church.
That bridge I think is beautiful.
Yeah. It's hard to hold those things. I think that's why it's like sometimes it's like you just want to be studying all that stuff, but then like to put it, what is it? I like to think of it. I'd like to aim for something what I call edgy wholesome, which is like at the core of your heart, you're pure and you're seeking God and you're like trying to follow that path, right? But then like you're edgy in the sense that like you're willing to take some risks and you're willing to like push it and push the envelope. Sometimes you might be wrong, sometimes but God's grace extends and like just willing to go, because I feel like a lot of Christians sometimes will, actually I don't want to make a generalization, but I think a lot of people in general will just play it safe.
Yeah.
But like, God, no one ever played it safe with God.
Yeah, that's good. In your career path, would you say you've played it safe in terms of you said you're a CPA, you kind of had this very
about as safe as it gets,
white collar job, this whole bit, and then you kind of stumble into making content.
Yes.
How does that happen? How does someone who is, I mean, that's a really one. It's a well-paying career, but two, it's like there's always a practical utility for it. How do you go from like, did you end up like being a CPA for a YouTuber and get the idea? Like, how did you get into actually making videos?
Yeah, so I've always had like an artistic side to me. So as I mentioned, my mom was a pianist, my dad was an engineer, so I have like both left and right brains going on. Working through accounting and finance, like all throughout, like after college, I always knew that this wasn't like, I never woke up thinking about debits and credits or thinking about financial models. I knew this was my passion, but I didn't know what my passion was. I think the short of it was just that like, and then somewhere along the way, at some point, right before going to business school, I was like, I've always kind of been interested in film and made a couple of videos in college. I took a 6-month little filmmaking workshop in San Francisco and I just kind of fell in love with film. I was just like, people get paid to do this, to make film, to tell stories. And so that kind of always was a nugget. And then basically what happened was at some point, pandemic hit, I was unemployed, had a lot of free time. And in that space of living alone in New York City, in Greenwich, in an apartment in Greenwich Village, unemployed, feeling very disillusioned about my life, about the world. It was a weird time and not sure about my career path. Had to go through a process whereby I was just like letting go of like worrying about what other people were thinking about me and letting go of like feeling like I needed to be as good as my peers were or something like that, because all my peers were like VPs at banks or something and getting promoted, and I was like freaking at home just sitting around and couldn't and it's like the pandemic but even underlying that, just like I'm single and I can't get a girl, like all this stuff, right? All these frustrations and that was like whatever the 40 days of wilderness, but coming out of that and being like, fine, or not fine, but like, God, okay, I put these things away. I put away the burden of like needing to feel like I'm as good as other people or like worrying about. Once all that went away, then I was like, well, what do I want to do? I don't know. Maybe I'll just start a YouTube channel. Like I really like videos, so I just started a YouTube channel. And then from there is just, and then that kind of grew into realizing like, oh, I'm like pretty decent at like talking to people and talking with strangers and like not getting them, but like creating a space for them to feel comfortable to share deep things with me. And I also like, I'm very inspired by it, and it really fires me up, because what happened was like, you know, I went through all this like hero's journey stuff, right? And you know, in the past, I was not privy to the pains and brokenness of life until I had experienced it. And once I experienced it, I was like, oh, this is what life's about. You know, it's not about like mansions and whatever, sitting at home. And I was just like focused on comfort and pleasure, right? But then once I like kind of experienced pain and brokenness in my life, I was like, oh, this is it. This is it. This conversation I'm having with this woman who lost her son. Like this is it. This is why Jesus came to die on the cross for our sins. And like, when I have conversations with people and I hear God and see God working in their lives, and in the same way that I saw, the more I saw God working in my life, the more I saw the kingdom of God working within me, the more I saw it in the world. I was like, oh, this is their journey. Like this guy who grew up in the Bronx and was like doing robberies, but then went to prison for like 6 years and came out of it like a changed man. It you know what it was? I think it was like it was seeing change in people. That's what inspired me. Whenever I see change, that's kind of like when I'm talking with someone, the moment when I start sensing like, oh, they went through something, they came out of a different person. That's I'm like, ooh, let's go. Tell me about that, because I experienced it within myself, and so then it struck me as super important to find in other people. Yeah, and I know I'm like babbling a bit, but like, yeah, it was just like seeing change, because at the end of the day, I think that's like a sign of God working is when someone has changed for the better.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. And when I compared your format similar, the grittiness similar to Soft White Underbelly, are you familiar with that channel at all? Oftentimes there's a lack of change there in those interviews. It's just like people are what they are, you know, and he's like interviewing these raw stories of folks, you know, that are homeless and Skid Row and this whole thing. And there is no redemptive quality to some of those stories, you know. There's a few of them, you know, like my buddy Johnny Chang that was on there, like beautiful story, came back.
Script fellow,
yeah. And then there's other stuff that's just like, oh, bro, like I just sat here and watched this like brutal story of this like meth addict and her journey. Whereas like with your videos, it sounds like you're trying to like find some sort of hope and some sort of change.
Yeah, I try to.
Yeah, that's dope. All your stuff's not exclusively Christian, which I also find interesting. Some of them is like just part almost man on the street style interviews.
Yeah.
And what is the kind of philosophy behind that? Is just kind of creating content that builds a bridge with people and letting people be vulnerable?
Yeah, you know, I think because I came from I'll just call it non-Christian background, I didn't grow up with a lot of like kind of some weight that folks who went to church went to, like maybe they were hurt. Like for me, I don't know, I'm just like, God is God. What, like a lot of people these days are like, oh, I don't want to say I believe in God, I believe in the universe. There's just a lot of weight with the name God that for me I don't have. And so then my channel isn't a Christian channel for sure. I don't want to be responsible. That's a high standard. But like, I'll just talk about God because like, I don't know, it seems very commonplace to be like, hey, do you believe in God? Like, what do you think happens after we die? Because like, I feel like that really, like, if that comes out, right? But like, I don't feel uncomfortable asking a random stranger, hey, do you believe in God?
Yeah.
Where am I going with this? I guess what I'm trying to say is just like with my content, I'm just trying to go out and see where God is leading me and creating. And sometimes like God is mentioned and sometimes he's not mentioned at all.
Yeah.
But I feel like he kind of is the undertone for everything.
Yeah. No, it's refreshing.
I try not to make it like Christian or non-Christian. It's just life.
It's refreshing. It's dope.
Yeah.
It's dope. It's very fun. And it makes sense when you factor in all of these different things, because a lot of people would use your exact same format and it'd just be straight street preaching. Let me ask you a couple questions and then go in for the Jesus sales pitch, you know?
Yeah.
Your stuff feels more organic and more conversational, you know? And so it's and that's what I mean by like it's different, it's dope. It has a great place in the market that I think is like, yeah, it doesn't need to be a Christian channel. Like, and that's great and that's awesome, you know? Because I think it allows you to build bridges with people who may not, you know, go for the explicitly Christian thing, but just, oh, this video is cool. He just talked to this person about their life, and then they stumbled across the video where you're praying with someone, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very smart and very well done. Are you hoping to transition into doing this full time?
Yeah. Hope nobody from my work is watching this.
So you're still a CPA?
Yeah. I'm still working. I'm not gonna say where I work, but yeah, I'm still. You could probably look it up. But anyways, I'm still working as the full-time job. So like, but I have enough work-life balance where I can like do these things, and I hire editors because I make money, right?
Got you. But eventually.
But yes,
this transition.
Again, I don't wake up thinking about spreadsheets, right? I wake up thinking about like magic and content, and so.
Man,
I don't think anyone wakes. Actually, there are some people who wake up on spreadsheets, and God bless them. They're doing God's work, like because that. But yeah, no, I wanna do this. This is where it's at.
We talked offline in terms of me kind of following the opportunity, and then the passion followed, you know, and it sounds like in a way where you followed having a stable job, financially probably paying well, that then allowed you to experiment and be able to invest in trying this format of content.
Yeah. So I think I'm lucky in that like I don't have to take a sponsorship for this, a brand sponsorship for this product. Hey, will you go talk about couches with people?
Yeah.
Nah, I'm good. You know, like I'll just go talk about my stuff.
No VPNs that you're selling.
Yeah, no VPNs.
No Manscaped.
So there was like a car theft security thing. I was like, I don't think I can have interesting conversations, but you never know. But yeah, it allows me to just make stuff, whatever I want to make. So I'm grateful. You know, God's like. I don't know. God can make everything come together somehow.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I got a lot of questions for you. I want to talk a little bit about heartbreak and you going through this breakup, and then in it, you discovering that there were some inadequacies about yourself that you wanted to work on. When you think about work on, I heard a phrase yesterday about needing to do deep work. What does it mean? And I think you kind of said similar language, needing to do work. What does that mean to you when you say, hey, I need to do some work, some deep work on myself?
Yeah. I think for me, it's really been, a lot of it's been like really being honest with myself. And that's continues to be something that I try to hone, like recognizing moments I'm not being honest with myself. I'm trying to think like before what the deep work was. Before what the deep work was, when I was in a period of like waking up every day in kind of a survival mode and like just feeling depressed all the time. Deep work was just showing up, and it was like, you know, my Spotify playlist was like Eminem, Not Afraid, like you got it, you can go, you can keep going. Like deep work in the past was like you can keep going, you can do this, because like in the past, like it was like when you first climb that mountain, it's like, dude, like every day's a battle or whatever. Like that's deep work was showing up and then like doing the right things, doing the things you should do, doing the things you shouldn't do. And then as I've kind of increasingly mastered that, I think now for me it's kind of like you know, what do they say? The small is a gate and narrow is a path that leads to life, and few ever find it. And it's just like, it's an increasing amount of like, I don't know. It just feels like a filtering, like where it's just coming down to a very narrow path. And so I think what it is it's being super self-aware of moments where I'm like, oh, I notice myself feeling envious about this person. I'm noticing jealousy arise. On the car ride here, something I've been working through is I noticed that a lot of times when I talk with some of my close friends who are non-Christians, because my closest friends are non-Christians, because like from high school and college and stuff, I noticed that I feel a little bit of resentment towards them that they judge me for my faith. Because like
Mm.
I've gone deeper in my faith.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, Eric, why are you not smoking pot? Like why are you not like do you really think you can't sleep with women? Like
Mm.
God created, like they don't understand these things. And so something I've been noticing was like, oh, why do I feel resentment with them? And where is this resentment coming from? And like, so it's just like paying attention to the negative emotions that I have
Mm.
and then just working through them and
Mm.
being like, going through the layers. So for that example, it's like, well, one, it's like a prideful kind of thing of like, oh, they think I'm stupid, but like, dude, if they knew all the work, all the Bible reading I've been doing, and like, how can they be so judgmental? They don't know anything. Like, so there's some ego stuff to it.
Yeah.
And then I got to work through that and realize that like, oh, they're not seeking God. Like, of course they're not going to like be on the same page with you about this. But then even deeper level, it's like, oh, actually it's like, I don't feel seen by them. And that's painful when you don't feel seen by your closest friends or your parents or whatever. And then it's like working through that and being like, okay, God, like Jesus, how do I like make sure that I'm seen by you first, you know, and get that filled up. So this is the work. This is kind of what the work looks like. And I don't know if some holes I feel like never really get fully filled. Maybe some they get like 99%. There's always a little bit of an edge. There's always a little bit of like grace involved. But like, I think over time, it's like increasingly feeling more full and increasingly feeling like those moments of envy and jealousy and insecurity and smallness get increasingly smaller and smaller and smaller. I don't know if they're ever going to go away on this side of eternity, but certainly they've gotten to a point where they're not causing like depression and void and loneliness as they were before.
Man, that's interesting. I was thinking about this. So there's a whole lot of thoughts when you describe that. Yeah. One, I think of when you talk about, not sleeping with girls, right? And whatever, being Christian. I think of it this way. And I'm curious how much of this is maybe just regional for you, because man, folks in New York don't get married in their 20s. Folks in averages, they push it out and push it out and push it out, and then folks are starting families in like their late 30s, and it's such a different culture, where out here, and I'm in Southern California, but it's not like LA, San Francisco. Like I'm in San Diego County, but this is suburban, you find a lot of people that are married. I was married 23, you know. I've been with my wife for 19 years. Yeah. Married 15
That's why I'm
years.
just like, that's crazy, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
and people say that. They're like, that's crazy. But if you think about it, like, there's an order to life that, like, I heard this illustration of, like, if you just got, you bring home a box from Ikea and there's, like, no instructions for it. And it's like, well, I don't know. Is it a coffee table or is it a helicopter? Like, I guess we just got to figure it out, And it's like, no, it's a coffee table. Like there's specific instructions for it.
Yeah.
You put it together sequentially. Yeah. And then you get the amazing benefit of having said item because you built it. And ironically enough, this concept of an Ikea marriage is something that the late Kevin Samuels talked about, which is really weird. It's like the one thing he said that I like appreciated is like build a life together and piece it together, and be poor together, like live together. And it's this tension because money fights and financial problems can be really difficult on a marriage. But at the same time, it's like, man, the bond me and my wife have of just like getting it out the mud and building a family and building a home and all these things is really cool. So when you talk about something like that, I just go, man, there's an order. There's a beautiful order that God has for marriage, for this beautiful covenantal marriage of like a man grows up and leaves his father and mother and figures out a way to do the work of becoming a competent person. And I always describe it as becoming the priest, provider, and protector of your home. Not to say that women can't work, but a lot of women are going to want to
king archetypes. Yeah,
they're going to want to stay home at some point when they have little kids. And it's like you build this out, and when you look at it that way, and you just think about 100 years ago, 50 years ago, like we've always been wired, I think, to start families, reproduce, and build villages, and continue on. And it's only until recently where society had this concept of like adolescence has crept in, where you're like 18 to 32.
Do whatever you want.
Do
Yeah.
whatever you want. You're like you're a man child. You're like you're
Yeah.
not a child anymore, but you're not really a man, and so there's like less expectation of you. And what's interesting to me is the a lot of the people in my immediate community, like I'm not the anomaly. Like Zach got married at how old are you, Zach? 21. 21. I was at a thing last night. A friend of ours, 10-year wedding anniversary, and everyone who was in the room was about 7 couples, all with the caveat of one got married in their early 20s, and have all been married for 10 years plus, and so like I think there's a beautiful natural order thing. But if you're around folks that are checked out or in just areas where all they know is San Francisco, New York City, Miami, big city, coastal,
Yeah.
we're gonna party and be men, children, and do the things.
Yeah.
Then of course it's gonna be foreign to them.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing they don't understand is how awesome it is to be married to the same person for 15 years, and how beautiful it is to build the intimacy aspect of life. How beautiful it is to build the trust of my wife believes in me oftentimes more than I believe in myself. Like how beautiful it is to build a family, and how awesome it is to have kids. Like it's difficult to even articulate how dope it is to have an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old. And my 2-year-old, unless she knows you, she's not going to open up herself to you. So people are like, if I have kids, I don't know if I'll like them. And it's like, well, yeah, because you've never been around a freaking 2-year-old who's the most adorable thing in the world. So I think like people who don't know Jesus or aren't around this proximity-wise, it could be difficult for them to understand the practical benefits of how God's laid an order to things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying everyone needs to get married in their 20s. That's not what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm saying is there's a beauty to it all that could just be difficult. And so like you feeling a sense of resentment, I feel like, oh, bro, that's such a bummer that like they don't know how amazing a covenantal marriage really is.
Yeah.
They don't know how safe you feel in your life after you've been married for 15 years really is. They don't get it. And it's like, it's almost not their fault. Like, it's almost like, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're saying by like attacking you for like being like, yeah, I don't want to go smash random broads and it's awkward and clunky and one night stands and all this weird stuff. And it's like, yeah, you're right. Like, you're right. And I could prove it to you empirically. You're right. I could prove it to you with the data that like the most sexually satisfied people in marriages are people who were virgins.
Yeah.
The people who are most fulfilled, the least likely to get divorced, are people who didn't go out and increase their notch count. The people who stay married the longest, the people who have the most mental health, right? Physical health, all these things. Like, God was right, dude. And so I almost feel bad because what it is it's selection bias. It's you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know that there's tens and thousands, probably millions of people that got married in their early 20s, love Jesus, building businesses, building families, having great lives, and they're not perfect, but they're crushing it, And so anyway, I just wanted to share that with you to say like, you're right. Like, you are actually in the right, not just spiritually, but like empirically speaking, like the data's on your side, and that's dope.
Like, I'm hearing this, and again, this is like what you were alluding to. I'm actually more in the camp of my friends because, like, I don't know what covenantal marriage like. I don't know what having children is like. So it's requiring faith on my end to be like, okay, God, like, this sucks, but like, I'm going to follow you. If just solely because I know if I don't, I feel so jarred that I don't want to go there. I'm going to follow you on this, but I can't honestly say right now that like, oh yeah, I believe that covenantal marriage and sex. I don't know. I won't know until I get there. So that, I mean, I appreciate that. I'll try to absorb that and take that in. I think if I were to have more conviction as you and belief, the things my friends would not bother me because I would have more conviction. And that's probably the other learning deep work for myself is to not just be like, hey, I don't want to do these things, but like, why? And do I really believe it's the better way? Which is some work. This is the deep work that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. I think the conviction and belief comes oftentimes from the certainty of being on the other side of something, right? This is what I mean. Like, I love food. And if I'm not careful, I'll be the guy that's easily addicted to sugar. And if I'm not careful, I'll go from the guy being addicted to sugar to like, and Zach could attest to this, to like, let's Instacart the flourless cocoa cookies every day, and I'm having sugar every day. Or like, I'll be the guy at the donut shop at 11 at night, like a freaking crackhead, right? It's like I have a problem.
You got like powder on your nose.
Bro, it's nuts. But what I know is if I eliminate the sugar and I lock into a workout regimen and I increase the chicken and the broccoli, on the other side of that are abs and a body where I feel awesome with my shirt off, with my wife, you know? And I feel better and I have more mental clarity and I don't have the sugar crashes every day. And right, the evidence and the confidence comes as a byproduct of walking through that process. And initially thinking, is it really worth it to give up the donuts and the flourless cocoa cookies? I don't know if it's worth it. I don't know if it's actually better for me. But then you walk through it, and then I've walked through it, and then I've like gotten shredded, and I like, oh man, like my after photos look nuts, and I feel great.
Yeah.
And that's where the certainty and the confidence comes from. Because I know more chicken, more broccoli, cut out the sugar, get more sleep, drink more water, hit the weights, go to the gym, walk more, and then like compound that in a year from now, and you look like a different person.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So it's like, but it could be difficult for someone when you're trying to convince them like, hey man, like you want to cut out the sugar and you want to increase the protein in the chicken and the broccoli. And they're like, but why? I like sugar. And it's like, you do like sugar, but it's going to kill you. Like this is going to kill you.
Yeah.
And so to your point, oftentimes the certainty and the confidence and the evidence comes from being on the other side of something and then being like, oh, like everyone who talks about eating more broccoli and chicken has been right all along, and I just didn't get it, you know?
Right.
And it's tricky. It's tricky.
Right. And I think part of it is also, if we're using your analogy, it's like if you're not in a place where eating chicken and broccoli is providing you some sort of like, you recognize value in that healthiness.
Yeah.
And which is what happens when a lot of people who aren't seeking God, they'll be like, I don't see any value in purity. Is it, you know? So then it's like, yeah, I don't see how. I don't see why they would ever sacrifice the sweets, like because it's very sweet.
Yep.
But having also tasted sweets before, like I know they feel. I think if they were really honest with themselves, and this is where we go back to honesty, I think they were really honest, even if they didn't know God, maybe I think they would still feel a little bit of like, oh, this actually isn't that great. I don't know, maybe. I like I have like, you know, all my guy friends, right, 30 in their mid 30s, like living the dream in New York. Like it's good to live as a capable, competent man in New York City in your 30s when you have money. When and when you're 35, you can basically date anybody from like 18 and above. And
they're living the fresh and fit life.
Yeah.
Andrew Tate manifested, right?
yeah, without going to prison or anything. And I can imagine like that's probably I imagine they get tired of it after a while. They're at some point, I think they do want to settle down. Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's just like I can see fruits of their life. But I also feel like my life's pretty good. I'd rather not go through like the sleeping with someone and then next morning you're like, oh, what the frick? And like feeling all weird inside, like that. I think I can in the moment say like, you know what? I'd rather like not have that. But it took a long time to get there.
Yeah, well, I mean, and again, you are immersed in a city, and your friends that are like, man, there's cultural disconnects, you know, that are often incongruent with what it means to be a follower of Jesus, you know, and that could be tough, man. That could be tough. But I believe God has you there, like strategically, even with the style of content you're making. I feel like all of it is intentional.
I believe that.
And your cross to bear is going to be a little different, you know, and it's going to be a little trickier to navigate it initially. But I think you fast forward 5 years from now, 10 years from now, like it's going to be awesome.
I believe that, and I believe good things will come. And also, I'm just like, I have no choice. Like, what am I gonna do at this point? Not follow God?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I've gone so far. I'm not gonna be like, I'm not gonna turn back and go the
Yeah.
other way.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, all right, God, I'm not thrilled about this, but I'm also happy. But you know, I'll give these things to you.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I've been wrestling with is just this idea of like deep work. Like you talked about the honesty and the self-reflection and all these different things, you know, and I read, multiple times I've read this book now, and I read Power of Habits. The book I just finished is Atomic Habit. I'm not sure if you've read that, but amazing. And I feel like the deep work is the day-to-day commitment to systems and disciplines. I don't even like that word disciplines, but systems that can help you become the person that God wants to chisel you into, right? And so like if I do too much self-reflection, I'll be like, oh bro, like I'm really a mess. Like I'm really, like we were at this game night. We have these couples around that have, you know, we all hang out, and one of them's in the army and they come back. So whenever they come back, we all do these game nights and we hang out. The other day we were talking about but he was talking about how he would go to Tijuana as a 15-year-old.
That was TJ Maxx.
Yeah, no, not TJ Maxx. Tijuana has like this club scene. Basically you can go and drink underage. And so he's talking about 15. And I like had a flashback to like being 11 at a strip club in TJ and when witnessing my buddy pay for a $5 prostitute. And I was like, dude, I don't think I need to rehash this. Like, I don't think I need to go deep on that. Like, I think that could just, those memories can just die. Like, this is like, it's like, I'm sitting here thinking about, like, man, I've had a really bizarre, like, dark upbringing, like childhood, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't, you know, I have an amazing Christian therapist, and we've put together a whole like course called Master My Habits in terms of this stuff. And he's never once asked me like, how does that make you feel? He's never once asked me like, let's think about your childhood. It's always like, all right, like we're going to help you chisel yourself into who God's called you to be. What is the Holy Spirit wanting to do in you as a father, and you as a husband, and you as a leader, and these different things. And it's amazing. And so I think sometimes when people say deep work, I go, but are we just dwelling on some of the darkness and then calling that deep work, right? Are we exploring all of our idiosyncrasies and darknesses and stuff like that?
It's a balance, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of that for me personally, like I don't know how much of that I need to know all the triggers and all the things, as much as like, let me just do the things that I'm committed to being on the other side. Like let me just turn my phone off when I'm with my kids. I don't need to know why I want to be on my phone. Like I like dopamine, like the next person, right?
Yeah.
I always think about going back to the food illustration is like, there are like some people have an addiction to food. I would probably say I'm up there. Other people just like sweet and savory food. It's not super deep, right? Some people have an addiction to porn and like objectifying women. Other people just are like a naked woman is attractive. Yeah. It's not super deep, you know? And so it's like sometimes we want to like overcomplicate things that are just like, dude, the human body is amazing and it's fun to look at. That doesn't mean it's okay. It just means we have to check those things and submit them. But I think sometimes we go to the human body to look at, and therefore I'm this like wretched, deplorable human that like has all these issues that I need to like dig up and share and be honest about. And I just go, I don't know if that's always helpful or healthy, you know. And I'm not talking about you. I'm just more processing my own junk. You know, that I'm like, the more I think about it, I just go, I don't know. You know?
I think I know exactly what you're talking about, and I think I can fall into that trap a lot as well. I journal a lot. I journal pretty profusely. I think for me, like going back to honesty and self-awareness is not always super clear to me. So for me, that self-reflection does help. But I also do know that as a nostalgic person, I can dwell on the past probably a little bit too much and be like, hey, let's just do things differently, and that'll cure like 80% of whatever we're doing, and I don't have to like spend an hour in therapy every day.
Do you go to therapy?
I did go through 2 or 3 years of therapy.
Nice.
Yeah. But at some point I was like, oh, I think I'm good now.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, I think so too. And then we stopped.
Yeah. That's awesome.
But here's a question for you. Have you ever been delivered
of demons and stuff?
Yeah.
I've came up to service. I've came up to get prayer. I've asked for prayer, and I actually sat my pastor down once, our worship pastor, and I said, hey, like I feel like this is spiritual. Like my appetite towards porn at maybe 20, 19, 20, 18, 20, somewhere in there, it just feels abnormal. You know, do you think a Christian could be demon possessed? And he's like, demonized, oppressed. I don't know. I don't think he's indwelling you and controlling you as like an autonomous human, blah, blah, blah. So I've pursued it. And what I found was the freedom came on the other side of incremental changes over time. You know, like it wasn't like we're going to do this right now. Now, I know other folks that have had that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I pursued it. Our church is very charismatic. I'm talking like flags on a Sunday morning, charismatic, you know?
And these are folks who have been trained in deliverance and stuff like that?
Some of them have. And then some of them definitely roll in the prophetic, and some of them definitely roll in that. I'm talking guys that you saw like the Jesus Revolution movie, you know?
I haven't seen it, but yeah.
Yeah, but like they go like hippies that go back to that, and they're like casting out demons the whole bit. And then I'm also close with Pastor Mike Signorelli. I don't know if you know who he is.
Sounds familiar.
V1 Church. They're actually in New York, one of the fastest growing churches.
Okay.
He's like a face of the deliverance movement, like him, Isaiah Saldivar, Alexander Pagani, who's also has a church in the Bronx.
Yeah.
And so we went to a trip to Israel, and so we've talked about this stuff extensively. And so I sought it when I was younger, and nothing really worked. What worked was approaching it from a mental health aspect, and then approaching it from a let me just commit to systems in my life, and then over time those things do. Because I will agree, and I've talked about this with them, is like I do think because I was molested as a kid, that I do think that opens up some sort of portal to something, you know. And I don't know if it's just like trauma and it's all in a natural, or there's a demonic component to it. Because I'm 8 years old. My son is 8 years old, which is really trippy to think about. I was 8 years old, and there was boys that were 13, 14 that like penetrated me, like full on gay porn, the whole bit. And I'm like, that was demonic. Like that wasn't like boys just being boys, you know. There was something there. And so it was one of those things where it almost what's the verse where Jesus says some things come out naturally, some come out through prayer and fasting.
Yeah.
It felt like my journey was prayer and fasting. It felt like it was like decades of like prayer, fasting, counseling, therapy, secular therapy, Christian therapy. And by Christian therapy, I do not mean a Christian counselor. I mean a Christian therapist who's been on the front rows 30 years. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, like there's freedom. There's like true freedom in these areas.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not a slave to sin.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
How about you? Have you gone through deliverance?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And well, I'll just kind of like, I think based off, like, first off, like, thank you for sharing that. And I'm well, I'm sorry is an understatement, but I feel for that, for your story. For the deliverance, you were mentioning that you sought it earlier. I think having gone through a deliverance episode recently, and then having have a close friend of mine who's going through some, and I'm just hearing these stories, and I'm just like opening. You know, Paul says like it's a spiritual battle between like evil spirits of principalities, all this stuff. Like there is. I've just been privy to a whole world of like evil spirits and demons, and I think there is going back to balance. Like you can go too deep in that, and then just be like, wait, actually, hold on, I just need to like do this, and I actually don't have demons. But also sometimes like there is some stuff down there, and sometimes those stuff can't come out until you've done healing and like repentance, and like until the soil is ready for like stuff to come out.
Come on.
So it could be, and I don't know, but like when you were seeking it before, perhaps you didn't go like you've already done the work, right? You the way you can talk about it so freely now shows me that you've done the work, but like there could still be some spiritual remnants. I almost like feel for, but just based on my vantage point now, the deliverance, like we can go through the emotional and physical healing and the mental and all that stuff, but it's almost like going to the dentist and just getting some cavities drilled out that like a therapy, like you'll be healed and it won't affect you on a moment by moment basis, but there's still stuff down there. Like Jesus came and he was constantly casting out evil spirits. That's like half of what he did, right? I mean, there are people I talk to who believe that every single person has evil spirits inside of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you since you brought up deliverance, which I really like,
And this goes back to deep work. This is the deep work I'm
Yeah,
talking about. 'Cause
yeah.
I think this is also involved.
Yeah, what I appreciate about my brothers in those streams is they've actually been more intentional to talk about the psychology aspect more, and it kind of went away from like dismissing bipolar and schizophrenia as a demon and saying like, no, that could be a natural, right? But it could also be a demon, and like they've kind of softened their position on promoting mental health, which I've really appreciated them doing.
Yeah.
Do you think there is a spiritual component to like a spirit in the city where you are in terms of New York and the zeitgeist of the culture there? Not on the individual level, but like a delusion of it's like you're in the upside down almost, you know? Like, I don't know if you ever watched Stranger Things, but like,
Yeah.
things are backwards, you know? A lot of things they just seem backwards. And I love New York City. Like, I love New York City. Like, that's probably my number one. I've probably been to New York City a dozen times in the last decade.
Yeah.
But do you think there's anything to that potentially?
Is your underlying question like, do I think there's like a lot of evil spirits and demons in the city or something
Yeah,
like that?
yeah, and a spirit to the city.
That's like an evil spirit?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know enough, but I will say that someone once told me that they got a word from God, and God said that New York City was very close to his heart. I think it's a very special city, and I could imagine in a city of 8 million people, with the history it has, with the industries it has, with the stuff it has, like there's probably a lot of brokenness that we can see. Yeah. There's a lot of weight there. I kind of have a little bit of rose-colored glasses still when I go out and I interview and I walk around.
Yeah.
I still see hope and joy and light in people. Like when I interview a stranger, I still try to see the good in them. But I think if I were going back to honesty, like being fully honest, it's there's probably a lot of bad stuff there.
Yeah. It's not nothing.
No, every corner, every density. Like if there's rats running around, like, and there's garbage, like there's probably a lot of garbage in New York. And maybe that's like what fires me up so much about the city. Like just walking out and you go there and you're just like, the moment you step out, you're like, you already feel missional. Like, you're like, God is at work here. And let's go.
Yeah. What I think is awesome is Christians being in these cities, because I think the fundamentalist aspects have pulled away from the cities, right? They pulled out of the arts, pulled out of the cities, pulled out of where culture is, pulled out of media, and have kind of went away. Whereas like to see you in the city, on the street, doing the type of videos you make, right? Like people being vulnerable, crying, letting you pray for them. And then seeing, Pastor Mike Signorelli go to New York City, plant V1 Church, and just see what God's doing. It's dope. Like it's refreshing, it's refreshing. At the same time, there also just seems to be like, the more I go to like major cities, the more I go, dude, this is some backward stuff, like this is like, it just reminds me of, wow, is this where most people are at spiritually? I go, yeah, this is kind of upside down.
But do you think so? Then do you think like small cities are better off, or?
That's a great question. I think where there is a cultural zeitgeist of certain values, I don't think that those values always impact areas that don't have the same pace, right? So, like, for example, people think of California and they think of Los Angeles and San Francisco. Those are the two biggest cities. But if you go throughout the rest of California, it's very different, right? Like you come to like Los Angeles and Orange County are very different. Los Angeles and San Diego are very, very, very different. Culturally different, politically different, church-wise different. Like it's just there's a different zeitgeist here, right? And I think whenever you're getting close to media and Hollywood and the music industry, I think you get into different I don't say value systems, but like the culture is just different,
Yeah.
You have there's a groupthink aspect to it all, like this is what it is. Like we go here, we chase dreams,
Yeah.
we push out marriage, we push out career and responsibility, having homes, building families, leading communities. We push all that out in the pursuit of the temporal, instead of like one of the dopest things ever, which is family and marriage and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's something to that.
But I'll just to kind of throw devil's advocate here a little bit, but like in these big cities, I'll say that when I went to a church in San Diego, I went to a church in San Diego SD yesterday, and what am I trying to say? I guess what I'm trying to say is like, yes, people when they move to big cities, they push away the temporal, or they're chasing the temporal. There's a delay in all these things. There's probably a greater risk of whatever, but like, there's a rawness I feel like in a big city that, to call yourself a Christian in New York City, like you really believe in it.
Oh yeah,
you really believe in it, because like, why would you call yourself a Christian in New York City?
Yep.
There's no benefit for that.
Yep.
And like the people I meet, the people in my church, like everyone's so passionate, and like that's what kind of rubbed off on me.
Yeah.
I feel like the faith is like, there's a seriousness and gravity to the faith that like when you live in your city, that when you're living by the beach and the sun's nice and you wake up and you go to Phil's Coffee or you grab a burrito and life is good, it's just hard to get to a certain level because you don't realize your need for God. And I think like in a city you realize it, because every day, at least in New York City, you're it's a survival of the fittest moment you leave.
Yeah.
So that's just like, there is a downside to moving to a big city and chasing those things, but there's also like ambition and passion aren't necessarily always a bad thing either.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's partly what my book is about. Is like there's a passage in 1 Thessalonians, and Paul is writing this church in Thessalonica, which is modern day Greece, port city, super booming. In Acts 17, he talks about the persecution there, and so these folks go. These folks in this church are getting saved. They are loving Jesus. They are doing good things. He keeps saying they're doing good things. But in that, they are also kind of slipping on their purity. So he has to keep reminding them of that. And they're seeing friends get persecuted and even some folks get martyred. They're having questions about like the return and the resurrection. And so it's this interesting tension that he's writing this church in. And he's writing them and he's saying like, look, like Jesus is going to come back. The resurrection of the dead is going to happen. But he's saying, continue on doing the good things. Hey, don't be sexually immoral like the pagans. And then he gets to this verse, chapter 4, verse 11. He says, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, working with your own hands, minding your own business, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders and you won't be dependent on anybody. And then it's subtle there, right? And then in the second book, chapter 3, he goes on again about don't be dealing with anyone that's idle. Don't be dealing with anyone that doesn't want to work, this whole thing. So there's this interesting tension that these guys love Jesus. They're facing persecution, but they're getting kind of sloppy in their living. Purity as well as their work ethic and their grind.
Losing their edge a little bit.
They're losing their edge. And he's like, dude, it's your daily life that's going to win the respect of outsiders. It's your work ethic that's going to be a testament to other people. Stop being idle. Stop being lazy. Stop depending on more wealthy Christians. Don't, just because you're saved and Jesus is coming back, that doesn't mean you check out of any responsibility.
Yeah.
So I think ambition, I think you totally nailed it. I think ambition is something that the church is really dealing with today, because you got folks that get saved and like Jesus is their hell insurance and they just kind of check out. And that's where I think something like New York City is beautiful, because it's like the grind and the grit and let's get it. And then the how do we channel that though, right? Like, what does it mean to lead a quiet life?
But it's all like environment, right? Like if I were having lived in California, I get where people from California. It's like, again, it's like life is good. I was in this church yesterday. I was right by the beach, sun is shining. Like, it's just like, yo, man, this is, I feel God's love.
Where did you go to church? Do you remember?
Yeah, Light Church.
Light Church,
Yeah. Great vibe, energy, whatever, atmosphere.
Yep.
But yeah, I guess what I'd be curious is like, I'm a little bit afraid that one day when I move away from New York City, am I going to lose that edge? And I don't want to. But like, I also, having already spent just one afternoon at SD, I'm already like, oh.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing that's tricky about here that people don't factor in is it's probably just as expensive to live out here as it is in New York. Yes. So even though the weather is nicer, the external pressure of like, bro, I can't just coast. We're building my business. Like we're hitting the gas right now. We're seizing the moment. We're going hard, you know? So there's an external tension of living out here, unless you come from generational wealth, which I don't. Like there was no, hey son, let me help you buy your first property. Like there was none of that. Like we just had to get it out, literally get it out of the mud.
Yeah, but besides like the financial monetary grind, but like being exposed to like the brokenness of humans, like on a daily, constant basis.
Yeah,
I feel like that's harder in ST because like there's just nice beaches. I don't know. I just was walking around.
No, because, and this is the trippy part. It's gonna bug you out. I learned this 20 years ago. I took an oceanography class at Maricosta College, which is an amazing community college here in Oceanside. And I discovered, dude, that other places ship their homeless people here.
I did see a lot of homeless, yeah.
So you go to downtown San Diego, you go to Skid Row, LA, you go to these places, Oceanside. There's a lot of homeless people here, man, and they're all not from here. Right? There's people that have been displaced because it's gotten more expensive to live here.
Yeah.
And then there's people literally being bussed in that if you just say you know someone in San Diego or in LA, they ship people here.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of brokenness. So it's this wild juxtaposing of like sunshine, cool coffee, surf lifestyle, and then like, but the natives can't even afford to stay here anymore. The locals are having trouble. You know? Can we keep up with building affordable housing while building $1 million homes? You know, is there incentive to build affordable housing when $1 million homes is the only thing that like it's a whole lot of tension. And then you add 3 major military bases in San Diego. You got Camp Pendleton, which is one of the biggest ones. You got Miramar and the Navy in San Diego and Coronado. You just create this very interesting hodgepodge of people that like it's more conservative than LA because of the military bases, and a lot of folks who retire stay here. But it's not the South, you know, it's not like Texas. So it's a very interesting dynamic that's here. All of our sports teams fail. Nobody goes to the games. No one tours here anymore. You know, there's like too much.
Chargers did pretty good last year, right? Last season.
Chargers are in LA now.
Oh,
they've been in the Los Angeles Chargers for that's a sore point because they could never fill their stadium.
Yeah,
San Diego just got too much going on, so it's a very interesting like dynamic that we have here. But I do agree with what you're saying. Like there is you're closer to the brokenness. I think so. I think you're closer.
So how do you keep your edge?
I talk to people.
Yeah,
I really try to talk to people. I have a lot of close people around me that
are going through it.
Had it worse than I did, you know, and that like going back to that concept of like deep work, you know, and just seeing you have these conversations. Like I asked you that question because I was at something and somebody looked at a friend of mine and requested that they do more deep work. And this is someone that I'll tell you offline, but this is someone who has gone through it. That she's been sober for a couple years, and last time she relapsed, she almost ended up in the hospital. This is someone that has had a ton of therapists, you know, and this idea of like deep work, and I'm like, I think she's doing everything she can with the capacity she has in this season to remain functional. I don't know if she needs to sit and dig up more trauma and issues. I think that the capacity to do the work is going to be different for different people based on where they're at, right? Like to me, the deep work is I need to not abuse food, and I need to keep going to the gym, and I need to be present. That's different than the person who like has been institutionalized for a decade. Their deep work is going to be like, let me just maintain a job, you know, like let me just not let me slide back into the door of recidivism, you know? So I think like there's this tension of what does that mean for different people? And I think a lot of people are doing what they can with what they have. And I think you're probably closer to that, you know? Like the lady, you know, kind of coming full circle, the lady you interviewed and then you had the year follow-up. I think she's doing what she can with what she has. To go through something as traumatic as she went through of losing a son, right? What was her name? Frankie. For Frankie to lose a son and in the way that she did, like I think she is doing the work, you know? Could she go see a therapist? Could she start eating more chicken and broccoli, Ruslan? Could she start going to the gym and working out her dopamine levels and lowering her cortisol? Like, yes, she could do all that. But I think some people are doing what they can by just holding on, you know? And so it's so it's hard. So for me, how do I keep my edges? Like I have been blessed to be a blessing to people. And I don't talk about it publicly, but you'll see, you know. I've been blessed to be a blessing to people, and it's dope.
So for you, it's like seeing the opportunity to love and bless others.
Yeah.
That's what keeps you.
Yeah.
motivated.
And not try to make them little versions of me. Cause there's something off here too. It's probably some of that hurt and that shame. I just channeled the addiction to more productive things like building YouTube businesses and getting shredded. It's just the insecurity channeled productively.
Right.
It's the brokenness channeled productively.
Yeah.
Right. You have two people, twins. Dad is an alcoholic, used to beat on mom. One dude grows up, becomes an alcoholic. The other one grows up and becomes a millionaire. What is that? Their capacity to handle
different.
Their capacity to handle trauma is different. How they channel their hurt is different, you know?
Yeah, it makes me wonder, like, once we get to the other side, it's like, and we experience the full healing, and we're kind of like, how far did we really go in this life, right? Like, is it gonna, you know, what does God say? Your good deeds are like dirty rags to me. Like, it's like, or perhaps we're just scratching the surface of all this stuff. Yeah,
I love. What I love about your content is your ability to meet people where they're at. Like that's something that reminds me is like meet people right where they're at.
Literally,
You're not you're in a physical sense. You know, I'm in a. Come on, let's go. Like let's conquer Rome. Like let's do it. You know, and people are like, yeah, man.
You're like my pastor.
I'm kind of chilling, you know? You know? And so, but I think meeting people where they're at and loving them where they're at unconditionally and extending just your presence, I think is beautiful. I feel like you do that at scale so well, you know? And you get to make content out of it.
Yeah.
You know?
It's funny because as you're telling me these things that you're like, I'm taking them in, but I'm also just like, and you're probably experiencing similar, I'm just like, I'm just kind of doing what I want to do. Like I'm not trying to do these things. I'm just like following my curiosity and what I enjoy doing. But it is when I do get to love on others and have the opportunity, I don't always do. Yeah. But when it does happen, like with Frankie, it's just like, thank you, God.
Yeah. Yeah. Any idea how Frankie is doing now? Someone in the chat asked.
Yeah, Frankie and I are Instagram friends. Like we chat a bit. I mean. So like in the follow-up, hold on, I just gotta observe.
Sorry, didn't mean to distract you.
No, I just completely forgot this is like, I didn't even register that people are watching this live streaming.
It's only a handful of people watching.
Okay. Okay, well that makes me a little bit sad. But anyways, no, I'm kidding. Frankie she's doing better, right? So like, I think that first time we met, praying for her, I do think there was some sort of spiritual thing whereby like God took away some burdens from her. And she even says in the second interview, like she came away from it lighter and stuff. But as she mentioned in the second interview, every day she still has a moment where she like kind of hits that point and she has to kind of like go through the grieving process again and again. So where is Frankie now? Frankie is doing better each day, but I think she's still struggling.
Yeah.
She's trying to move to a new place, single mom. When we met, she was delivering food on Uber. She's an Uber delivery person, so she doesn't have like a ton of financial resources. Like if she did, I think life would be a little easier, right? To find therapy and find that help. So like, she doesn't have like the same sort of resources that I had to go through my stuff. So continue to pray for her. I mean, I don't know. Like Frankie and I will continue to be in relation with her for a long time.
Yeah, that's dope, man. That's like I call it relational evangelism. You know, I think sometimes people just want like a quick like, just get her to say the prayer, dude. You know, it's like that's not how life works. You know, like it takes time. It takes time.
Yeah, and it's like asking her about the day-to-day stuff. It's not just like this powerful prayer, may the God of spirit fall on you. It's like, hey, like, did you eat lunch today? I don't know. What are you?
What do you think from a macro standpoint? Like, you're in New York City, cost of living is crazy, inflation is beating people up. You know, beating up the Frankies, right? And then you have traumatic stuff. You have people who are spiritually dead aren't always going to have sense to do good things, make good decisions. How do we assess these things? Like how do we as followers of Jesus make the world better from your vantage point?
Say that question one more time.
How do we as Christians in a world that's broken, in a world that has external variables like poverty, cost of living going up, wealth inequality, all the challenges, part systemic, part bad choices. I don't know where the spectrum is. I don't know why everything is the way it is, right? How do we make the world better? How do we contribute and let our light shine and be the light of the world and be the salt of the earth? Like, what's a practical step you would have for people?
I feel like this question is important, so I just want to think about it a little bit. There was a time when I first moved to New York City that I was doing a lot of volunteering with the homeless, and just like hearing their stories, and you know, every one of those people grew up in families that were abusive, and just you hear about the stuff they went through, and you're like, okay, I get why you're addicted to the things you're addicted to, and I get like why you're in this place. And I remember one time I came home from serving for a couple hours, and had like all these conversations with people and hearing their stories. And I came down and I came into my room and I just like broke down and just like wept. I don't, that doesn't happen often, right? Where like, I just broke down and wept because I was just like, holy cow, the world is so broken. Like, oh my God. Whatever. You read about just dire wars and all that stuff. So I think the first thing is like, it's not my burden to save the world because I can't. And if I try to be a hero, which I'm sure sometimes I do, like I'm gonna get broken down very easily because like it's so I'm just human. I'm just a dude. How am I gonna take the burdens of the world, right? So already like that's not our concern. We're not even able to I think save the world. Anyways, so that's like the initial mindset thing. But practically speaking, just being obedient to Christ. The answers to everything is always just like Jesus. Jesus.
Good answer. I'll take it.
Yeah. Every answer is like, every question can be answered with Jesus. It's just like, you just keep following Jesus and he'll, you know, I'm creating these videos now, right? Like, and so like, the aim was never to save the world. That is like a side aim. Like that is like something that gets me fired up or whatever. But like fundamentally, it's like, God, how do I just be in relation with you? How do I remember my dependence and my reliance on you? Right? Like David in the Psalms wasn't like, God, how can I save the world? He's like, God, I need you. God, help me trust you. And like, you know, forgive my sins. It's just like being in that relation. And from there, the saving the world stuff will come out of it.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's dope, man. Any final thoughts, final words? Any questions, any other questions for me before we wrap up?
How long are your interviews normally, and how long has this been?
This has been exactly an hour and a half.
And how long are your interviews normally?
About an hour and a half.
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half, yeah.
How do you feel like you've built like a social muscle over time? Because I'm pretty spent. Like I feel like for the past 30 minutes,
Yeah.
my eyes have been a little glazed, and I'm like,
we still got another 2 streams today. So
yeah. Dude, how do you? Because I interview people, right?
Yeah.
And I am so I'm introverted. I'm so beat afterwards.
Yeah.
Is that a muscle that you built over time?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably. I said this to my wife yesterday, and I'm not trying to get super deep, but we were leaving our little thing with all these other couples we're friendly with, and I said, if any of our parents woke up and had our lives today, they would be so stoked. And that's how I think about it. If my dad, who had to leave Baku, which is the city I was born in, and go work in Moscow because the Azerbaijani community didn't like the fact that he was Armenian, and he had to go work on Moscow, which put strain on his marriage. And then he would import products from other parts of the world and sell them on the black market and be an entrepreneur in a communist nation, and then came to America with nothing and built himself a life and lives in Del Mar now, which is one of the most expensive parts of the world. If my dad woke up in my shoes at 38, dude, he'd be pumped. He'd be pumped, you know? And so like I've been doing this thing where I try and imagine, I got this from Alex Hermosi. I try and imagine that I'm 80 years old and I wake up right now and I look at my wife and she's young still. And
you
I look,
wake up right now?
so I'm 80. So I'm 80 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I've done everything.
Yeah.
And God gives me this ability to time travel.
Mm.
And I wake up right now. I wake up my present life. I'm looking at it through the lens of an 80-year-old version of me. And I go, dude, my kids will never be this little again. I'll never be in this position, in the same exact position. I have such a blessing, right? It's like the Jay-Z line, like, would you rather be old Hove or young you, right? Would you rather be an old rich man or would you rather be a young man with a ton of opportunity, right? And so like, the short answer, sorry, I didn't mean to give you this long-winded answer, gratitude.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for this. I'm so grateful for sitting down with you.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for having these conversations, to think and to imagine and to dream and to immerse myself a little bit in your story. Like I am so grateful for the privilege to do this. I get it that like statistically speaking, man, like we defied the odds by like just to be here as sperm, first of all, but then to be here as YouTubers and creators, and then to be on other sides of the country and to connect and to sit here and have this moment. My gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah,
you know. And so I just constantly remind myself of that. Constantly remind myself of how amazingly blessed I am.
Yeah, and
getting to do this for work is, bro, it's nuts.
Was it all? Did you always have that gratitude throughout the entire, from the beginning to now? How has your gratitude shifted over time, changed over time?
Because I remember doing music full time, and I remember how hard that was, and I remember me and Zach and John Keith getting into my wife's 2012 Mazda and driving to New York, and being in Bed-Stuy and trying to find a parking spot in the middle of the night, and thankfully a lady told her that God told her to come outside and move her car 2 feet so we can park behind her. Wow. And having I remember how hard that was.
Yeah. And
I go, dude, I don't leave a 5-mile radius. I go to the gym, I go to church, I hang out. Like, so I remember that and how hard that was, 2018, 2019, 2017, 2016, trying to do a rap group and all that kind of stuff. And so I would say being on the other side of that, and I reflect and I think this makes it that much more grateful. My wife not having to, as I'm a full-time creative entrepreneur, my wife having to go nanny on the side so we can make ends meet. Like, and not that she doesn't have to do that anymore. She doesn't have to work at all if she doesn't want to, you know?
Yeah.
She gets to like volunteer for VBS all week and do Vacation Bible School, and we don't worry about it. Like, so I think like I remember the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? I remember the past.
You remember Egypt.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. I remember Egypt.
I feel like I'm like at a point where like I've certainly had some success, but I'm still kind of like in that mode of like oh, I'm trying to figure stuff out. Is this gonna work? That kind of stuff. And so there's like a little bit of in my content creation stuff.
Mhm.
So like whenever I meet people who have, I'm just like, I think there's just like there's a level of uncertainty and insecurity within myself with the things that I'm doing,
Mhm.
despite that I'm having so much fun with it, despite that I feel empowered and following God and just like, oh my God, so much gratitude that I'm not like debiting and crediting spreadsheets, but also like, I don't know. There's just like fear and uncertainty, and there's like on my morning run today, I'm going back to New York tomorrow, and after trips where I've like spent a couple weeks away from New York, like the day before, I always get a little bit of like, okay, it's back into the machine and back into it's gonna be war, it's gonna be battle. I'm getting ready, and there's a little bit of anxiety there, and it's good because it's giving me some energy and excitement, but also like, I don't know. Did you have that? Did you have like that sense of fear?
I think a healthy amount of paranoia is good. And it sounds like you have like just the right amount of paranoia, right? You have just the right amount of like,
I got to figure this out.
I got to figure this out.
Do this.
Yeah. And I think I actually think that's good.
Okay.
I think because you need a practical optimism to even try the stuff that we're doing. Right? Like it's like practically optimistic.
It could work. It
could work, right? Other people have done it. I don't think they're way more talented than me or better than me.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Why can't I do that? Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also very difficult and the odds are against me and I am not guaranteed a platform and I'm not right. Like, so there's like a balance of like practical optimism and like paranoia, ultimately saying, let me seek first the kingdom of God, right? Let me do things God's way. Let me seek God's face. And ultimately, the chips will fall where they may, And so, yeah. So yes. Right now, June is a slow month. We had 3 record-breaking months, and then June is like everyone's going back to school and summer vacation. And we're looking and we're like, ooh, but we're expanding. Right before you walked in, Zach was on FaceTime with his brother. We're bringing on another editor, remote editor, because we're like, we want to increase the quality of what we're doing here. We want to shoot more cinematic stuff, and we want to keep our output going even higher, And so, yeah, paranoia, fear
of the future.
Oh, yeah.
But like coming back to the present, looking at the work at hand and being like, Larry, let's just keep going.
Yeah. I mean, I'm dealing with some real practical stuff with the city because we're getting this retro permitted. So there's like practical, like, oh, they're down my neck, So there's some of that. Yeah. So yeah, I'm right there with you, but it's just different.
Something last night, I have a buddy staying in my place in New York City, and he just left last night. And typical New York City fashion, right before he leaves, my shower, like the faucet like breaks and like the water won't stop coming out. And it's midnight in New York City. Got to call my super. He texts the plumber. Plumber shows up. It's all this stuff that he has to go through. I was like, dude, I'm sorry, man. Like, you have to like, and his flight's at 6 a.m. and I just feel bad.
Oh.
And he said something that just like stuck with me. He was just like, dude, problems are a sign of life. And I was just like, I wish I had that mindset. Like,
that's good.
Like problems, obviously avoid, like we're not seeking out problems.
Yeah.
Like when we have, like when something bad happens, like randomly bad happens, like a shower thing in the middle of the night, like, all right, well, let's just solve it. Let's just fix it.
That's a great perspective.
Or like a zoning thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's a problem. Unfortunately, I don't see how this helps me and how this grows me or whatever, but like it's a problem. It means that I'm alive.
Yep.
If I didn't have this, I'd be dead.
Yep. Problems increasing, like dealing with the city because now I'm a homeowner and I have a studio in my garage that, you know what I mean? Like they're first world problems ultimately.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're totally right. You're totally right. Yeah.
Well, really appreciate your having me on here.
Yeah, man. This was fun.
A really cool experience.
This is fun. I want to visit you in New York.
Yeah. We'll do some, I'll interview you.
Okay. Eric Chang. That's how you say your last name, right?
Jang.
Jang. Gosh darn it. Eric Jang, ladies and gentlemen. All right. We're out of here.